My name is Kama Ross, and I'm the District Forester serving landowners in Leland, Benzie, and Grand Traverse County. And today I have with me a good friend and colleague, Charles St. Charles. Charles lives in northern Michigan, and he is a nature wildlife photographer. What really intrigues me about Charles St. Charles is that he is able to connect people with the natural resources in a way that I, as a forester, am not able to. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Tell us a little bit about this project that helps us understand what's going on in the other eco-regions.
So I've got kind of two interrelated projects. The first is called Nature of the Wild, which is a digital publication, and I'm visiting each of the major eco-regions in the continent. So there's 15 of those eco-regions, and I'm collecting stories and videos and images of what's interesting and imperiled and going on in those eco-regions. And then at the same time, I'm finding hosts for time-lapse cameras, and I'm leaving 6 cameras behind in every eco-region. So when I'm done, I'll have a network of 90 cameras that are recording all the time. And then we can see the passage of the seasons and migrations and what's going on in each of those eco-regions.
So this is a new project that you're embarking on, but you've been a nature photographer for your entire life.
Very long time.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the changes that you've been photographing or observing as a nature professional.
So probably in all ecoregions there's winners and losers, and the species that are generalists seem to be more able to adapt to change. And it's actually an opportunity. Some of those species are going to expand their region. So if you've got corvid, which is a very good generalist, so that would be ravens, crows, and blue jays. Mm-hmm. They're able to expand their territory and how they live their life and what they eat according to however changes in the environment. Sure. So they're very adaptable. And then if you've got a species that has a specific niche and has very specific food and they're slow to adapt, then they're in serious trouble. Okay. Unfortunately, species that are invasive exotics tend to be exactly the species that thrives in change. Oh. So if you take a look at like purple loosestrife, which is a beautiful species that we all hate to see because it's taking over a lot of the wetlands here. So they're now blooming like 3 weeks earlier in this century than they did in the last century. So they're adapting very well to the climate change. And then you've got species like Carner blue, which is a butterfly that has some very specific requirements. So they need to spend the winter under a bed of snow that insulates them enough to get to the spring, and then they've got only one host plant, which is blue lupin. So this year we've got all kinds of false springs going on. Uh-huh. Who knows what a Carner blue egg is doing underneath all of that.
And I know you've just spent a lot of time photographing the monarch butterflies. Yeah. And visited their wintering grounds in Mexico and done some wonderful footage of that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you feel the monarchs are affected by climate change?
Yeah, that's a species that there's some really hard data showing that the number of monarchs has really gone down in the last 2 decades, 90 to 95% fewer monarchs. Wow. So there's like 3 major things that are involved in the decline of monarchs. Probably the biggest contributor is they need milkweed as a host plant. And there's this big area in the center of our continent that the agricultural practices are now way cutting down on the amount of milkweed that's available.
Sure.
So that's more agricultural, but there's 2 other factors that are really tied closely to climate change. One is they're concentrated in one area in Mexico on the wintering grounds. And there's millions of these butterflies in a few acres. In fact, in 2003, it was 27 acres, and in 2013, it was down to 1.6 acres. So it really has shrunk down. So the population has gone way down, and those areas are areas that are seeing logging, and if there's any kind of disruption to the normal weather, those monarchs are much more vulnerable. And then if you look at the monarch migration, they funnel down through Texas, and then from there they go to Mexico, and they spend November, December, January, February in Mexico, and then they turn around and they head back up to Texas, and they lay their eggs and die in Texas. And then there's another generation that leaves Texas and heads midway up the continent, and then we see them here around May. Well, there's been a huge drought going on in Texas for about a decade. So it was very hard for those butterflies to get food, either as an adult or as a larva. And then in one year, the drought ended, and then they had floods. Yeah, so it's just gone from one extreme to the other. And it's a global change that we don't see directly where we are, but it affects the species that migrate.
That we have come to really love and appreciate.
Right.
So is there something specific that you feel like we could share with landowners to help them do their part? And
okay, so the biggest thing is milkweed, because when they're a larva, that is the only food that they eat. So if you don't have milkweed, you don't have monarchs. Residential part, grow milkweed in your garden, and then hopefully you're telling people to go with native species.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So native species have evolved to fill, the habitat here, and plants that are native species and bloom, that's the food that's available for the adults. So native flowers, compound flowers in particular, they're a real big bang for the visit for butterflies, because there's lots of nectar there.
Okay.
If you can avoid using herbicides and pesticides in your garden,
chemicals,
please do.
Yeah, huge. Well, I think connecting people that maybe we aren't reaching through your art of photography is a really important thing, and I do appreciate the work that you're doing.